Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Tell Me Yours, a storytelling podcast with me, your host, Trey Everett. Hello and welcome to another episode of Tell Me Yours. Today on the pod, I am so excited for this guest and this story. She is a brilliant singer-songwriter. She is in a tremendous band that if you haven't heard them, you absolutely should pause this and go listen to them. They are called the band Milk. Please welcome to the pod today with a brilliantly funny and wonderful and heartbreaking story, Mollie Jane. To attend an event like that in a long time, and so we were all kind of like really excited to be there, and it was like safe and everyone was vaccinated, which was awesome. Or I just don't know if it was just like the people there were super fun, but yeah, either way it was a great time, and my back hurts and my voice is gone, so it was a great party. Yeah.
It was a great time. My back hurts.
Yeah.
I pulled a muscle. Sounds like a good wedding.
Paying for it now, but it was worth it. How are you?
I am doing really well. I just got my own studio apartment, and
Amazing.
I've got my childhood piano here with me, and my bike, and my records, and and myself. So it's been good. It's been like a good time of, transitioning into, I think just like really my own. I've never had my own place before. So
yeah,
this is
it's
really
huge.
a treat. Huge. And it's huge. Yeah. Do you live alone?
I do. Yes, I do. I lived alone for a couple years, and then I had roommates again just because it was like, it made sense and I was going to save a ton of money. And then I lived with roommates for about 3 years, and I was like, oh, I need my own space again. Like, I just need it. And so I, during the pandemic in June of 2020, I ended up moving back into my own place. And then I've been on my own again since. And there's nothing like it. Like, I do love living with something alive. Like, I love living with a person or like a partner or having a roommate. I do love that. But I also love a plant or a cat, or you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
Or something. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm also like, I'm very much a social butterfly. Like, I recharge around people. So I've noticed that like having my own space has been really like a really surprisingly healthy thing for me, where it's kind of forced me to like recharge alone.
Yes.
And I'm like really thankful that I've been able to kind of like cultivate that skill, because it's not something I ever had before. And it's also not something I ever thought I needed before. Like, I always thought like, no, I just need to be around people. But I'm like, oh wait, no, I actually do need to be alone sometimes, and like not have anything else or anyone else around me. And so I'm excited for you if this is your first time living alone. It's very exciting.
Yes. It is. I totally hear you. And like, I guess I would also classify myself as someone who I love people. I'm a people person.
Mm-hmm.
But I think I also know that I like am very, I absorb a lot. I sometimes feel like sponges in situations. Yeah. So like, I've always tried to really value my alone time, but I think that like living alone, it's almost like you have to have the discipline to be able to face your solitude. And like, I'm starting to realize too that like solitude is like, it's like almost a skill that you have to like work at. And it's such a beautiful thing that I moved just from a house, and I was the only woman there, and I'm so glad I did it, but it was definitely a singular experience. And so now to have my own solitude, it just feels really incredible. And I feel also too, like, I don't know, maybe it's just because I'm like leaning into the theme of solitude right now, but it feels like I feel like the world really needs some solitude so that we can give to each other from that same place of like, no, I know who I am. Like, I'm pulling from this well of like my own love so that I can like give it back and share it, and connect with people. So
absolutely.
I don't know.
I think
I'm doing well, and
I love it. I love that so much. I'm excited for you. But yeah, kind of just like piggybacking off what you were just saying. I think like if the pandemic did nothing else, I think it kind of forced us to like really sit with ourselves. And I think now that like, I mean, obviously acknowledging we are still very much in a pandemic. There's still thousands of people losing their lives every single day to this virus, which is tragic and was, I think, very avoidable. Knowing that though, if it did
Yes.
nothing else, it like really gave us a chance to like sit with ourselves. And now that we're sort of starting to come out on the other end, I think we're seeing a really stark contrast between the people that chose to change and the people who refuse to. And it's interesting to me because like that, I think that's
Yes.
dangerous a little bit. And I think we're seeing it with like vaccination rates. Like the people who like chose to change are much more willing to help each other out and to get vaccinated and to wear masks on planes and all this kind of stuff. And then the people who refuse to are not. And it's
Yeah.
sad to me, just because, like I said, like I think a lot of it was avoidable, but at the same time, I'm kind of appreciative of it because, like, I know who I want to invest in emotionally and with my time and with my energy, and it's the people who
Yeah.
kind of reacted the same way that I did, and were like, "Hey, I need to sit with myself, and I need to like understand that my decisions are never just about me. Like, even if I'm alone, even if I'm single, even if whatever the circumstance is, like." The decisions I make every day affect everyone around me. Um, I prefer those people,
Yes.
yeah, with that awareness, yeah.
Yes. 100%. I could not agree more. It is fascinating and terrifying and enriching and enlightening
Yeah.
to be alive right now and to be living through all of this. And yeah, and I can also say that I'm so grateful that one, I was able to like, because it's not like everyone got the opportunity to like take that time. A lot of
Mm-hmm.
people were working or weren't able to, go on unemployment.
Absolutely, yeah,
So
absolutely.
like I'm super grateful that I was one of those people that did have that privilege. At the time I was actually, I mean, this kind of goes very naturally into the story I guess I was gonna tell.
So this is
Um
what's so funny about having done this podcast now, because like I started recording episodes in November, and I have currently I have episodes scheduled through like mid to late July. So like I have a ton that I've done. And
oh,
I've noticed the
dude.
first ones I started recording, it was very much like chat, 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 awkward pause. Okay, you're gonna tell me a story, and then I would like kind of
Yeah,
force that
yeah.
segue. But I've noticed the
Yeah.
more I start to do them, like this is what exactly what happens, where it's like we just talk, and then it like naturally blends into the story, which is
Uh,
amazing. So I don't
and
have
that's
to.
such a I feel like that's such a testament though to like the type of person you are. And I'm so honestly like Trey, there's nobody else, really, there's truly nobody else that who's a friend of mine at least, who I would think, they'd be great at doing a podcast and like having a podcast and just being that person to just be that person and do that. There's nobody else other than you that I think you're just such a graceful converser and you're always there for the moment and you're such
Mm,
a yes and person. So I think it would make sense to me, and it was such a testament of the kind of like converser you are, that things would eventually, and sounds like it happened pretty quickly. It ended up you ended up finding a very natural rhythm to be
I
able to like
well,
post,
I
you know.
appreciate that so much. I love it.
Yeah.
But that being said, you're about to segue into
Yes.
your story, which was great.
Yes. I'm so happy it happened so naturally.
Awesome.
Um,
Also, thank you for doing this. I'm so excited to chat with you. I love you. You're
oh my
wonderful.
gosh, I love
All of the
you.
brilliant adjectives about an artist that I could say, like I've said to you, and I will continue to say to you as long as we know each other. So,
Oh my
thank
God. Well,
you.
thank you. I am your mirror. We are mirrors. We're mirror friends. Um, yeah, it's just funny because I guess we were talking about solitude, and I think I was just saying I was really grateful to be able to have the time, or to be able to kind of claim my own time, I should
Mm-hmm.
say,
Mm.
on my own clock and not just the man's.
I like that. Yeah, I like that.
But I was able to, right before the pandemic started, I guess, um, I had just quit this job that I was working for this startup, and it was a trip and a half, and it just, it was a startup, so I'll leave it at that.
Yeah.
Um,
Anyone with
and
any experience with startups will understand exactly what you're saying.
right, unless they're the people that like, stuck with the startup and now they've got like stake in the company and like
Yeah, yeah,
it
yeah.
worked out for them. I'm not one of those people. But anyway, um, I so I just quit this job and I was on unemployment and I was at home a lot of the time, and I just had a lot of time for myself, and I just did a lot of I claimed my own time, and I think I did a lot of like less thinking and like more just like being,
Hmm.
and like especially with my work and my band's songs that we had been kind of playing out for. I mean, we've been together for almost 6 years, um, which
This
is
is the band Milk.
this is the band Milk, my band Milk. We actually just changed our name from Milk to the band Milk.
Love it.
Um, it should be noted. Uh,
Love it.
but yeah, I mean, we've been a band for about 6 years, and about I want to say almost 3 years ago, we released an EP of 6 tracks, and you know, ever since we had released that project, we did a lot of playing around LA, and we were really just trying to push it, and
Mm-hmm.
we were just trying to get out there, trying to get the project out there, and trying to build an audience. And we played for 1 year. It felt like we were playing like every weekend, every week. While it was really beautiful and enriching, and also new, because when we had recorded the EP, as Milk at the time, we had been working with another bandmate who, before we had even released our first release, had quit the band like
Oh
a month
wow.
before we released it. And so it was this very big thing of kind of resituating, what our makeup looked like. And
Mm-hmm.
I ended up just kind of, at first I was the, lead singer of the band, and but had written a lot of the songs, and we all write together collectively. But it just got to the point where, after a couple of years of bandmates kind of rotating, it was like, you know what, I play piano, and I can do this. And it wasn't, it wouldn't have been without, I think, Kid or Ian to also embrace the knowing that I could do that. And so yeah,
Mm-hmm.
we ended up taking a year to explore that as a trio. We played out live a lot, and a lot of the shows were really fun. A lot of them were like funny and experimental, and it got to the point where we were playing out so much, I think we all were a little blinded by the repetition. And it
Mm.
got to this point of like, why are we doing this again? Like, I don't know if you've ever felt like that,
I
like as a
actually feel like I'm
performer.
listening to myself talk right now because everything that you've described so far is something my band has gone through. Like even the sense of like kind of unexpected downsizing, and like we were a five piece, and then there were kind of some
Oh.
frustrations brewing, I'd say. And so the three of us decided to part ways with two of the members. And then again, we kind of had to go through the same thing because we literally were playing shows every weekend in Orange County, like hustling and doing what we quote are supposed to do to like build the audience and stuff.
Yeah.
And then we had to like quickly re-visualize what our makeup was and like what our identity was. And then like yeah,
Yes.
we kind of hit that wall. We were like, why are we doing this? Like, why? So yeah,
Yeah.
everything you're saying is like resonating with at the very least an audience of me.
I'm so glad. I mean,
Yeah.
although I'm sure like going through that, it's like it's so nauseating and also
Hmm.
really like off-putting, because it's like
Yeah.
this collective like identity crisis that you're having all together, but individually, but together. And
Yeah.
you're also doing it, when you add performing into the mix, you're also doing it in front of these audiences. And all of this to say, it just got to the point where uh we had played one last show probably in 2019, I think, at the end of November. And and I was such a wreck after that show. It was one of those
Mm.
shows where I was just like, I think it was, we got to this boiling, I got to the boiling point of like, what the fuck, like, what are we doing? Like, why are we doing this? I don't know what any of this means. And classic Ian and Kit were just like, we love you. And like, we're doing this. And like, it doesn't make any sense right now, but it'll make sense. And I'm just like, what? And,
Do you feel like, sorry to interrupt, but do you feel like that moment or that realization for you was like, was coming, and it could have been any show on any day on any night? Or do you think there was something specific about that particular show that kind of like ignited that realization for you?
I mean, yeah, that night was a little bit complicated for multiple reasons. I was playing, it was the three of us as a trio. It was
Mm-hmm.
at Hotel Cafe on the second
Mm-hmm.
stage, which is like, for
Home.
our band and so many artists and bands, home.
Yeah.
You get it. I know you guys just played there. You made a live record there
Yeah.
recently. It was so cool. Um, but we played a show there, and I think we opened for this band called the Misters,
Mm-hmm.
and they were really cool, really awesome. I don't think they were from here. I think they were like, I forget where they're from, but yeah, we played, and it was a rocky night for me. I wasn't fully feeling, I don't think I was fully feeling confident in my playing yet. And
Mm.
when you're on stage and you play the wrong note, or maybe
Mm-hmm.
I know you're a drummer, so maybe you missed a beat or whatever, something happens and you're not there for a second and you miss it and you mess up.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a lot of moments like that for me that night, and I just couldn't seem to get out of my own way. And toward the end of the set, we played this song called Easy, and I wasn't planning on sharing this, but we played the song called Easy, which is off of our EP, and pretty like intense, powerful song. And our ex bandmate was in the audience, and
Okay.
because he's been a friend of mine for over a decade,
Yeah, for sure.
and I just said, this is our last song, and an old friend is in the audience and he knows this one, and if he wants to come and play with us, that would be wonderful, but if not, we don't need to, we can just jump right into this. And he was like, I'll do it, and he came up and he played with us, and it was a lot of things, but it was really liberating, I think, mostly just to be able to just sing again, and not, because I was still kind of learning, I think, to feel comfortable playing and singing for a lot of my
Mm.
life. Like I've written pieces and songs all my life, but playing them was never something I did until a couple years ago, like playing them myself. Because I always felt like I was more of a vocalist. So I think like getting the opportunity to just be the singer that night was such a release for me.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, and I just kind of I lost it in the green room after. And there were all these people coming up to me like after that show, and it was a later show, and it was like a Saturday night, and there were just a lot of drunk people there. And honestly, thank God there were a lot of drunk people there. But they came up to me after, and I was like, packing up my Nord and like just like breaking down, and they came up to me afterward and they were like, just never give up, like keep going.
Oh no.
And I'm like, and I think that was also what brought me to the point of like, fuck, like, oh God, they were able to see through me,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
so I kind of like
Oh
broke
man.
down, and kids just like, and I'm in the green room. I came into the green room like hysterically crying, and I was just like, oh my God, like I just can't believe it. And kids like rubbing my back, and he's like, oh no, like it's okay, like this is gonna be okay, this is just one night. And Ian was like, Ian didn't really say anything the whole time. Yeah, I think he was just like there, like this, like sitting in the corner.
Mm-hmm.
And then he ended up walking me to my car that night, and I put my Nord in my trunk, and he was like, Ma, like I love you, and like I love this band, and like we're always gonna do this, like for the rest of our lives we're gonna do this, like it doesn't need to be like we don't need to like take it that seriously. Like without him saying that, he was kind of saying that, and I was like, thanks, and then so yeah, so that was a couple years back, but that was the last show I think that we had played before the pandemic hit,
Oh wow.
and then COVID hit, and the world's you know, kind of stopped a little, I guess,
Yeah.
for a sec. And so I had the time, and I had the time to look at these songs that we had been playing out that whole year and that we had been writing for years,
Mm-hmm.
that just weren't, we didn't track those songs when we tracked the EP because we were still kind of in the process of finishing them. I mean, one of
Mm.
the songs on the record, the oldest song that we have, and it's 6 years old, and we finished it the day before we recorded it.
Oh wow.
So things take time, you know, you
Yeah,
can't
yeah,
always
yeah.
like
I love that.
finish things when you want to. But anyway, all of this to say, I did have the time, and I think I realized in the probably mid 2020 that there was this kind of like underlying theme, I guess, of these songs or to these songs. And I was dog walking at the time, making some extra money, and I had a lot of time to like just, you know, I used to walk through Elysian Park a lot, and I love it over there.
That's
It's so
cool. Yeah.
gorgeous.
Yeah,
And
it's great. That's great.
yeah, and it's super stimulating too to just like let your mind wander. And so I would listen to some of the demos that we had. They weren't really demos; they were more like just
Yeah.
voice memos we
Yeah. Yeah.
tracked, like
Yeah.
from, you know, practices. I know, you know,
Yep,
and
absolutely. Before you even
totally,
explained it, I knew exactly what you meant.
yeah. And they're the
Yeah.
best anyway. Like the voice memos are always my favorite.
Yeah.
But I would listen to them and kind of just walk and let my mind wander. And I ended up kind of concocting a concept to fit these 12 tracks that I had never really seen like through before, but I was
Mm-hmm.
able to kind of yeah, just create this this concept. And it turned out that we had written unintentionally this conceptual record. And you know, I was able to take some time to kind of create a treatment plan, kind of a script of sorts of uh, you know, visual references that would inform the music, and vice versa.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and I thought like this could be such a great animated short. Not necessarily a short because the record's like an hour and 2 minutes, but somewhat short. So yeah, you know, we moved into this house. We moved from Koreatown, Eli and I, to this house in Pasadena last year around this time. And you know, we had decided that we were going to utilize the living room as this collective studio with all of our gear. And the house actually came with this beautiful 100-year-old grand piano, which kind of like sold us. We were like, oh, I guess this is the house. Like it came with this piano, you know, like, um, but so yeah, so we ended up, you know, working on the record there over the last year. Really, we met, uh, you know, every week, if not every other week, and you know, I kind of pitched them the concept, pitched to them the concept, and sent them the treatment plan. And I sent a very rough recording of me playing through all of the songs on this piano, but also kind of like trying to guide them through the concepts verbally.
Cool.
And and they were super into it. They were like, yeah, you know, and I was not expecting for them to be so on board, but they were. And so yeah, we met every other week. And you know, such an imaginative, and it continues to be one of the most imaginative experiences to, you know, just creating, or I guess continuing to solidify and finish these pieces with Kit and Ian was such a liberating and imaginative process, because even though we had this concrete concept that was evolving into all of these things, we were all able to kind of step into the music and visualize this world that didn't really exist, but that was starting to exist as we figured out
Mm.
and were able to musically fill in between, you know, these black and white kind of lines or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, we spent the last year working on the record, finishing it up, practicing it, writing everything. It's because it's conceptual, it kind of has that feeling that it feels kind of like one long song.
Yeah, for sure.
The first side of the record is actually just one take. It's like 22 minutes,
Oh
and
wow.
it's just
That's
this
incredible.
one moment of whatever the hell happened that, you know, in the recording. But yeah, so it was a lot of work, and we decided to do the whole thing live. We did the, you know,
Oh,
the
I
first
love
side
that.
is
I
one take,
love that so much.
and yeah, I love it too. And it, you know, I mean, there were moments where we weren't loving it because it
For
was
sure. Yeah, for
it
sure.
it's hard. It's hard to get to that point. It's almost like, you know, it felt like we were practicing for a performance, because essentially that's kind of what it is, you know,
Mm-hmm.
to do something in one go like that. But it was such a blast. It was such a blast. And we had intentions of just cutting it at in the studio, in our house, in our home studio. But because there were some relationship complications in the house, we had a
Mm.
bandmate rejoin the band in the house that lived with us, and then he quit, and it was just more drama. And so
Yeah.
I thought, you know, over probably at the end of the summer last year, I thought, you know, like maybe we should record this like somewhere else. It just so happens that Eli had, and
Mm-hmm.
also Eli has been kind of this evolving band member of the
Mm.
band for at least like 3 years. He kind of stepped into this project with us, and he plays guitar on it so brilliantly, and his instrument is kind of like a character of
Oh, that's
the
cool.
record, which is so fun, and he does it justice so beautifully. But
Mm.
um anyway, Eli had this friend that had was I guess a partner of a studio in Chicago, and Eli kind of pitched me this idea. He was like, what if we, you know, we went to Chicago and we just did this in Chicago? And then I was thinking, you know, like, yeah, that sounds good. Like to take this somewhere else might give it life in a new way. And
Yeah, for sure.
so we all ended up flying out there in mid-November. I'm an LA native, so it was cold as shit
Yeah, yeah.
for me. I was not, it
Yeah.
was like a Siberian prison kind of cold, but like that that's just how dramatic of a person I am, of a native I am.
I love that.
Um, yeah. So
That's
we
where
would
the wedding that I was just at this weekend was, in Chicago, and it was still very, very fucking
no,
cold. Yeah.
no.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's wow, that's insane. Where in
It,
Chicago?
it was, I don't know, to be honest
I
with
don't
you.
know. It's okay
Um,
because I don't think I can tell you exactly
yeah,
where we recorded. Because,
it was at this like mansion, like this old school mansion though, which was so
oh,
cool and so beautiful. And so my partner is like, she was born in Europe. She grew up in you know, Albany, and her family's from Michigan, so like she knows cold. And I was like, it's freezing outside. She's like, it's not freezing outside. And I was like, maybe for you, but I grew up in Texas and I live in LA. It's freezing
I'm from
outside.
Texas.
Yeah.
I can't do this.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, you and me both. Because when I was there, I wore this big puffy like Uniqlo jacket that was a gift to me. I'm so grateful
I love it.
for the people that gifted me that jacket. But it helped, you know. But
Hmm. It
it
didn't
didn't
at the same
change
time. Yeah.
it didn't change my LA native makeup.
I love it.
Um, but yeah, so we flew to Chicago. We flew together. It was our first time taking this trip as a band, which was really awesome because we've mostly just like played in LA for a
Hmm.
long time, and yeah, so it was really awesome. We took our one of my best friends, also is our manager of our band, Melanie Schutzius, and we all stayed out there. And the first night we ended up staying with this friend of ours who I won't mention his name, but I have to at least make up a name or something. Let's just go with like Jack. Let's just go
Perfect.
with Jack.
Yeah, perfect.
We stayed with Jack an hour outside of the city. Well, not an hour, probably closer to 2 hours outside of the city in this town. I won't mention the town, but the town was basically in the middle of nowhere.
Okay.
And it felt kind of like the type of place you go when, or not, nobody intentionally goes to these towns, or I don't know, I should say that, but it felt like the type of place, the type of town where you go and you feel like somebody's like going, like you feel like somebody just went missing like a
Mm.
block away. Like I don't, it
Yeah, I
kind of
get it.
felt
I
like
get
that
it. I get it.
to me. But you know, again, I'm just an LA native. What do I know? So I'm there, we're there, and we spend the night at Jack's place
Mm-hmm.
in this town, 2 hours outside of the city. Ian is there, Melanie is there, Eli and I are there, and we spend the night. And Kit flies in early the next morning. We all get breakfast. We head to the city, and we're all just having this moment, like we're here, and like we're doing this, and we're doing this all together, and this is just a fucking blast, you know,
Mm-hmm.
like.
Mm-hmm.
So we have breakfast. We go to the studio, and the studio is this like it's in this big building, this like brick stone building, and it's on the top floor, and it's essentially like this warehouse
Okay.
that they insulated for sound, and you know, really tall ceilings, a lot of light, but not that much light because it's
For sure.
Chicago in
Yeah.
November. So it's like a lot of white
Yeah. Yeah.
nothingness. um, so we're there, you know, and we get in and everyone situates themselves, and there's this gorgeous, dreamy grand piano with like a lot of depth to it. And
Mm-hmm.
I just am like so intrigued by it. I'm like, okay, this is what I'm going to be playing. Cool. Cause I had just been playing my upright, which I love.
Mm-hmm.
It's so comfortable to me. So I was like getting used to this new instrument, and, you know, Kit and Ian were kind of getting comfortable with their instruments. And Eli and Mel went upstairs to the control room because the control room kind of overlooked the studio.
Oh, cool.
And so you go up this like very like dark staircase, and it's like it's a little weird, like there is a vibe to it, you know. And so they go up there and they look at each other and they're like, oh, something just walked through us.
Oh, wow.
And I wasn't there for this. I just heard
Uh-huh.
about this like secondhand, but it makes all the sense in the world for reasons you'll discover.
Yeah.
But so that was the first, that was like one of the, that was the first session. That was the start of the first session. They came downstairs, and I don't think I had known about that quite yet, but there definitely was this like interesting vibe there that it
Mm-hmm.
felt like a little bit, just because of how the space was, you know, it was kind of this like revamped like warehouse that was a studio. Like it had this almost like industrial kind of feel to it, but it was also like we had everything we needed, all the gear was there, and
Yeah.
you know, we just needed to play the songs and do it. So we got to work. You also had to turn off the heat to
Oh,
record,
no. Oh, no.
which is something that I swear, before we even got on the plane to Chicago, I was thinking about that. I was like, God, I hope that this place is like, I hope we're still going to be able to, you know, use the heat in the middle of the winter in this Siberian prison of you know, this weather
Yeah.
in Chicago. And so, of course, like I was right. So, you know, Jack, the engineer who's engineering the session, he's like, you know, look, if you guys are ready, like we're gonna turn off the heat. So we had been warming up. We were like, okay, let's do this. So we start tracking side A. It was like one of the hardest things that we had ever done. It was so crazy. Like I I think at the time we couldn't tell if it was because we had, you know, trekked out here and made all of these sacrifices to do this, and you know, also we really wanted to do the project justice, but like it was more than that. Like
Mm.
people were uncomfortable. It was like this feeling of like the heat was off. It was like 25 degrees outside, and we were like sweating, and like I felt like I don't even know how to explain it to you, Trey. It just
Mm.
felt, it was so hard to get through that first take. And then when we were done with the take, we all just kind of looked at each other and we were like, this is just this is not how we thought this was going to go, you know,
Yeah, yeah,
like this
yeah.
just kind of feels weird, but we kept on trying to just stay open. So, you know, Jack was like, let's do another take. Mel's like, you know, do another take. Let's just keep going. So we keep going. We do it again. It's still just like this, like stuck feeling of like, God, this is so fucking uncomfortable. It just,
Yeah.
honestly, that's what it felt like. It felt so uncomfortable. And we're like still sweating, all these things. And then, but we keep going for it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's getting to the point where it's getting really hard because again, we're wanting to do it in one go. We're doing it in one go. We're doing it in one go. The day is passing by, and then Jack finally suggests, he's like, why don't you guys just like split it up in two parts so it doesn't need to be so intense.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I really didn't want to do that. But I was just like, well, let's
Yeah.
fine. Like, let's try it. And so we did, and it went okay, you know? And so it had been like, you know, it gotten to like 11 p.m. at this point, and Kid had flown in really early that
What
morning
do
at
you
like,
remember around what time you guys actually like started tracking?
I think we started tracking like probably around, and Kit had landed in from LA in Chicago around like 4:30. I didn't want to make us go until we had
Yeah.
nothing
So it's like,
left.
A, this is a long day for all of you, and then especially a long day for Kit, who has been there. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
he just, I love him so much. He just rallied. Like he got there and we got breakfast, and I was like, how are you doing? Because when we got breakfast that morning, like it was like probably 8 a.m. And I was like, how are you doing? And he was like, I'm ready. Like, let's just do
Cool.
this. Let's
Yeah,
just
yeah,
get
yeah.
this done, you know? And he had that momentum. But anyway, we run through this whole session. It's difficult, it's uncomfortable. The studio is, it feels like there's something happening that we can't really see there.
Yeah.
And maybe we're a part of that in some way. Like, so anyway, the day ends and it's like 11 p.m. and we go over back to this Airbnb in the city
Mm-hmm.
where we all stayed at and crashed at so that we didn't have to go all the way back
Totally.
to the middle of fucking nowhere.
Yeah, totally.
And so we get back, and I made the mistake of leaving my, I'm really into crystals, and I left my moonstone crystal, which is like a really pungent stone. It was gifted to me by my good friend Mecca, and she told me like, be careful with this because it's pungent and like it will attract.
Got
And
it.
I made the mistake of leaving it underneath the grand piano that night, that first session that we were
Oh.
there. And so we get back to the studio the next day. It was a Saturday morning, maybe afternoon, and we get back in and we're feeling ready to go. And I'm like, oh fuck, like I left the moonstone here. So I take it and I put it in my backpack, and I just remember thinking like, probably wasn't that smart, but like it'll probably be okay. So then we have this whole other session, and again it's like it's hard. It's feeling really hard. It's feeling like a hard session. Like I'll be the first to admit it, and I know that they would be too if Kit and Ian were here,
Yeah, for sure.
and Eli. It was just hard. It was uncomfortable. There was a lot going on, a lot we didn't understand, and a lot of things we couldn't get right. And it felt different from, you know, the progression of all of our rehearsals, all of this work that had led us to this moment. And it was kind of a little bit of a letdown. But you know, we had faith and we pushed through it, and we were able to finish 9 tracks out of the 12. By this time Sunday rolled around, that was the last session. We were cutting it pretty close to
Mm-hmm.
Ian and Kit and Mel's flight time. We had 2 hours to kill before they had to get on this plane. So we thought, you know what, let's call it. Like, we're in a good place. 9 out of 12 tracks. This is great. Not what I had intended. I wanted to go out there and finish our record, but
Yeah.
I was like, this is great. We'll take it. So we drive them to the airport. It's like a really, it's somewhat victorious of like, we did this, you know, sort of, and like
Yeah,
this was
absolutely.
fun, and it was such a blast just being there, you know, together, and we're just like kids, you know, we're just
Yeah.
like children. So we drop them off, you say goodbye, see you in LA, and Jack and Eli and I are, you know, the 3 remaining, and he's like, I got to go back to the studio tonight to you know, clean up the session. And also I had a drive that was downloading all of the all of the recordings so that I
Mm-hmm.
could take them back to LA and, work on them in my own sessions. And so he said, you know what, how about I drop you guys off in the city and you guys can go celebrate and go have a drink, go have a meal. I'll be
Mm-hmm.
back in an hour and a half. So Eli and I are like, okay, that sounds good. So we, he drops us off in the city and we're walking and we're trying to find the right restaurant. And like, I think, Trey, that there was something going on that night. I mean, sometimes I could be indecisive, but like, it just felt like the wind was like taking us in all of these different directions. And finally we found this like Italian place. We sat and we ate a meal and we had just been going all weekend. And, Eli's like, how are you feeling? Like, this is crazy. Like, and we're kind of just debriefing and processing. And I was feeling like really like emotional that night. Again, there was something going on that I think I was like maybe tapped into or something, because I was super emotional and we ended up like finishing dinner and I think I hadn't had a moment alone in days.
Mm-hmm.
And and also like I wanted to make sure like everyone was having a good time, and I just
Yeah,
wanted to
yeah,
make sure
yeah.
my band was like happy and that we were doing okay, especially like amongst the discomfort of that studio, like
Yeah, for sure.
so I kind of ended up just like kicking it on the sidewalk, and I just, again, I'll always be the first to admit me breaking down and crying, but I just had a moment. Had a moment, and Eli gave me some space, and when Jack dropped us off, he said, I'll be back in an hour and a half. I'll meet you guys
Mm-hmm.
in this area. So we'd stayed in the area, and so we were just kicking it, and Jack was going to be there any moment, and we're waiting in the fucking freezing cold.
Yeah.
I'm like, where's Jack? Like, I just need to go home. Like, I think like recording opened up like a whole other box of things that I didn't even know was going to be a thing, or so I
Mm-hmm.
thought at the time. And I was like, we just need to go. I need to get in bed. I need to take a shower. I need to go. And
Mm-hmm.
Eli's like, I know. So he's like texting Jack, no response. Turns into 2 hours.
Oh my
Eli texts
gosh.
him again, no response. No response, no response. 2 hours turns into 2:45, 2 hours 45 minutes. We're like walking around, like trying to find someplace warm and it's not like we can Uber
Yeah.
back to the middle of nowhere, which is 2 hours away. That's like a 2 hour ride. And, we don't have the key to his place. So we're waiting and waiting. And we finally we find this like cookie shop. It's like open like after midnight, and we're in there, and and Eli's like, I don't know what's going on. Like, I'm a little worried, but like, I have faith, that, we're going to find him and it's going to be fine. And I'm like, not even eating my cookie.
Yeah.
And, and then, we keep walking, because then now it's like 3 hours later, like 3 hours, 30 minutes later, we keep walking. And I'm like, we need to go, like, just find somewhere to be warm. So we end up going to this like bar with like buffalo wings and like the whole thing, and like it's like a Sunday night too, like.
Yeah.
And Eli and I just kind of have this moment of like, okay, it's like almost 4 hours now, like
Yeah, something is wrong.
something's wrong. Like, where is he, and is he okay, you
Yeah.
know and Eli's calling and calling, and he's like, I don't know what to do. What do you think we should do? Should we just like, should we get like, try to see if we can get like a hotel or something? Like, because the Airbnb, that booking had already expired. We were going to stay with Jack
Yeah.
that night.
Yeah, yeah.
And right in that moment, as we're like, something is wrong. Like, we don't know. Like, what should we do? Eli gets this call from this unknown number, and he answers, and Jack's like, Eli, oh my God, I've been trying to find you guys. I've been looking all over for you guys for the past couple of hours. Like, I'm here at this bar. Where are you guys? And Eli's like, what? Why don't you have your phone? Like, what's going on? Like, are you okay? We thought you got jumped or
Yeah,
something.
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
what? Like, and he's like, oh, meet me. I'm on the corner of this and this. Like, just meet me there. Like, I'm in the minivan. He drove this really big minivan Odyssey, and so we go outside and we find him. I go into the minivan. I just like sink into the back seat. I'm
Yeah.
like, take us home. Like, I'm just like, let's go. And But Eli's like, dude, what? Are you okay? Like, what happened?
Yeah,
Like,
what
are you okay? And
happened? Yeah.
yeah, and he was like, oh my God, we all were so relieved because we all thought that something had happened to each other, because what had happened
Yeah.
was,
Oh, I didn't even think about that. Yeah.
yeah, what had happened was he had left his phone at the studio, which was further away, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
much, too far enough for him to go back and get his phone. So I think he had told us originally, I'll be back in an hour and a half. So he tried us at the restaurant. We weren't there. And then he tried bar hopping to see if we were like,
Okay.
in the area. So he ended up calling his like his ex from a stranger's phone at the bar
Oh my gosh.
to get Eli's number, which was like a whole other thing. Anyway, he tells us all of this in the car. It all makes sense. Everyone's safe, we're all together.
Yeah.
He drives us back to his place. Eli and him have this like 2-hour conversation that I was like lucid dreaming in the back seat. Like I fell through that seat. I swear, I was like
Yeah.
in another place. And so we get there, we go to bed, pass out, wake up the next morning. This is now Monday morning.
Okay.
So we wake up and Jack is like, I got a couple things to do today. I'm not sure if you guys want to like come with me back into the city, because there was a reason to go back. I didn't quite know yet what it was. And so I was like, that's cool. Can you drop us off at this, at like a diner? Because I was really hungry, and I'm also like a diner queen. I love diners.
Yeah.
So we went to this diner called the Bright Spot,
Okay.
and it was not a bright spot, but Jack drops us off there, and he still doesn't have his phone because he left it at the studio.
Oh yeah.
And so he says, stay here. I'll be back in an hour. And we're like, cool. So we go in, and like we just intuitively, it's like, these are COVID times. Like, let's be, cleanly. So we go and we wash our hands.
Mm-hmm.
And then we sit down at this booth, and there are like 4 people there in this, diner in the middle of nowhere. And they're like 2 older women, in the corner booth, who are like kind of eyeing us down because, we're like not from there. And then these other like 2 dudes, 2 older guys at the diner bar. And the waitress comes up to us, and she's super sweet, and she puts down hot coffees, and we're like, oh, okay, like we're going to eat hot food. And like, she goes back to the bar and pulls down her mask a little bit, and she's talking to these guys. And I'm just like, I'm always scared of her.
Yeah.
And she's talking to these 2 guys, and she's like, yeah, I don't know what to do anymore. She's like, I don't know, my mother, she's just really been struggling so much, and now my sister has it, and I had to take my mother to the emergency room last night, and because she can't breathe
Oh my
anymore, and
gosh.
they had to put her on a ventilator. So it turns out she's like been taking care of her sick mother, her poor sick mother, and she's still coming into work. And now, who am I to say that that's wrong when our system
Yeah. Yeah.
no
Absolutely.
longer compensates
Yeah. Absolutely.
people, no longer sends out stimulus, checks to anyone. A lot of people, they have to go, they have to
Yeah.
make a living. So who am I to say that that was wrong? I'm overhearing this. And
Yes.
she's like, my mom can't breathe, and I don't know what to do. And I got tested last Thursday. And I'm like, last Thursday?
Yeah. Oh my
I'm
gosh.
like, last Thursday? Okay. So I like look at Eli, and I'm like, we gotta go.
Yeah.
This is not the place for us to eat.
Yeah.
And he's like, yeah. So we leave, and like, and we were like kind about it. We didn't just like walk out. We were like, thanks so
Yeah.
much. Like,
For
we're,
sure.
we're gonna, I don't even remember what we said, but I was like, thanks so much. Have a good one. And she looked at Eli, and I think he apparently said that she seemed to have figured out when we were walking out that she had maybe spoken a little too loud. But honestly,
Yeah.
thank God that she
100%.
had been speaking at that volume, because, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. So we leave. Eli's like, well, we have to stay here because Matt doesn't have his phone. We can't just like go to a different place. This town is like nowhere town.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
and I'm like, but we can like walk to the gas station and get a coffee. Like, I'm freezing,
Yeah.
This whole story, I'm just talking about like how cold I am. Just such a joke. I'm such a wuss.
I love it.
So we're walking and we go to the gas station, get a coffee, we walk back. It's just, again, it's just a weird town. I'm not getting the greatest vibes. Like, we ended up walking back to the bright spot parking lot, and there was this woman in her car with her son, and she had just parked like in this alleyway behind the parking lot, and she like just like lighting up a cigarette and like smoking a cigarette in the car, like with her son. And I was just like, this is an interesting day. Like, there were a lot of like crows around. I don't know, just there was something happening. And then her son got out of the car, to like get some air. And I was like, okay, that's good for him. And Eli's just like sitting on the curb, like staring down. And I was just like, you can't make this shit up. Like, this is just funny. And I just kind of started laughing. And then I had this moment of like, I just surrendered. Like, everything has gone wrong, it kind of feels like it's heading in that direction. And so I just start dancing. I like turned on Young Hearts Run Free, which is like this great disco song that I love. And I just fucking danced. And Eli was like, okay, Ma, like, you're crazy, like. And right in that moment, Jack pulls up in his minivan and he's like, what's good? He's like, you had a good meal, huh? And I'm like, yep. Like, we get in and we tell him, what had happened. And he's like, wow, I eat at the Bright Spot a lot. Like, and he was like, I better tell my dad, because his dad also like eats at the Bright Spot like every day.
Oh my gosh.
And we were like, you take care of everything you have to take care of. He's like, yeah, we need to go back home though for a sec, because I have to practice mandolin. He's also an incredible songwriter, engineer, musician, artist.
Cool, yeah. That's cool.
And so he had a gig to play in 2 days or something. So he's like, I need to go home and practice for like an hour. And we were like, that's cool. We have to pack up our stuff anyway, because we thought we're going to go back to the city and then maybe spend the night in the city somehow. We hadn't booked anything. We just thought maybe we'll stay with a friend or we'll just figure it out. Jack's upstairs practicing mandolin, and Eli and I are downstairs, and we're kind of packing up. And I bring out my suitcase to the kitchen because I'm like ready to go. And Eli comes out, brings out a suitcase, and I'm like, oh no. I had this feeling in my stomach, like this like deep shattering feeling in my stomach. And I was like, someone know and love is not okay. And I was like, and I also was thinking, like, did someone die? Like, I don't know. I just had this like crazy feeling. And I was like, Eli, text your brother. I thought there were like 3 people in particular. I was like, I've got to reach out to this person. Eli texts this person. And then right in that moment, Jack comes down the stairs, kind of just stops at the platform of the stairs. And I'm like, Jack, I'm getting this really weird feeling. And I think someone I know is not okay. And I don't know what's going on, but I was like, are you okay? Are you okay? Okay. And he just kind of sat down, and I'm like, okay, like, what's going on? And he's like, I don't know how to tell you guys this. The reason why I took so long the other night at the studio, not because I was spending all that time looking for you guys, but because when I went back to the studio after I dropped you guys off for dinner, I went to go check on your drive. I'd given him a drive so that he could download all the stems so that I could take it back with me. It's like when I went to go look at the drive, I just went to go make sure everything was cool, and I couldn't find side A. So I thought that was weird. So I checked the studio hard drive just so I could re-download it. And he said, I was looking and I found this session, but it was like grayed out. And I tried to click on it. It had no access. It led to nowhere. It was nothing. It was nothing of a session.
Gosh.
And he was like, so it was gone. And I freaked out, and I like didn't know what to do, and I was like having a panic attack and all these things. And he was like one of our really good friends too, and so of course listening and like obviously appalled, but like just like holding space for him too. And like it was just like I was freaking out, and I ended up calling this like Apple technician who was able to do like a recovery scan of all of everything that had ever been downloaded or created on that hard drive. That's why it took so long, because I was trying to wait there to complete the scan, but at the end of the night, it like reached completion and it wasn't there. And I was like, huh, oh, okay.
Oh my
And
God.
he goes, but I started another scan when I left that was I guess it was a different kind of recovery scan, ended up taking a lot longer. So he was like, part of the reason why I want to go into the city today is I want to see if it's still there.
Oh my
I'm
gosh.
sorry. It's okay if we need to take a break.
No, it's like it's so stressful. It's just anyone who's ever recorded anything like understands how stressful that is, especially for you two who had been so worried and had some sort of relief in that worry are now being given that worry again. Oh man.
So he's like, he was like, it would probably be a good idea, for you guys to come with me and we could go just check on the scan, see if it's there. And Jack is just apologizing. And honestly, when he told us, I was surprisingly relieved, because I could have sworn that someone died. I could have sworn that someone died. And I was so relieved to know that it wasn't an actual person, but maybe more of a,
Yeah, it wasn't someone, it was something.
it
Yeah.
was something. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Our intellectual property.
Oh my.
But so we go into the city, and I just decided, with Jack, especially because I think he was really embarrassed and he felt so bad. And, we had been good friends. And so I just said to him, I was like, you're not the computer. And this is, we have to go see if it's there. And I was like, you know what? Strangely, somehow this whole trip has kind of like made me feel a little closer to like what faith means to me. And like, I think that we need to all just believe that it's there. And if I couldn't even say the words because I wasn't willing to accept that reality. I was like, if then, that means that it wasn't it. And he's just like, okay, like crying. And I'm like, okay, so let's go to Chicago. So we go and we just like, we have a great time on our way there. It's like a 2-hour trek, and we get there. It's starting to become a little more tense when we're in the studio, just because naturally the studio is, quite frankly, haunted. It's a haunted studio. And which is somewhat fitting for the record anyway, because the record it's an homage to grief, and takes place in this kind of like spirited abandoned house. So it almost kind of lended itself in a strange way. But anyway, we get there and, we go up to the control room and it's still scanning. We've got about like 20 minutes left. And Eli gets this call from his brother and he was like, I'm going to take this. So he goes downstairs and he talks to his brother. And it's just Jack and I in the control room. And I can tell that he's starting to like freak out, because we're about to know, is it gone or not? And so he turns around and he's like, okay, I have a plan B. And I was like, you mean a plan C? Because this was the plan B, right? And so he's like, if there's this thing called drive busters, I think. And he was like, there are these like engineer tech guys like physically bust open the like hard drive of your computer, and they like manually like try to find all this stuff. And he's like going on and he's like, this could be our our hope and all this stuff. And I'm like,
oh man,
okay, why don't we talk about this after the scan's done? And he's like, no, we need to talk about this now. And I'm like, okay, so I need the number to the owners, I need the number to the person that owns the studio, because while you were the person conducting the session and playing computer, you weren't the computer, so like this technically took place on his property, right? It's not Jack's studio, it's the owner's studio. So I said, at this point, like, if the scan is unsuccessful, I need the number to the owner and I need to open up a dialogue, and it doesn't need to be, I'm not trying to go after anyone. We need to get them involved. We need to get him
Mm-hmm.
involved, and he needs to know. And he's like, no, 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 no. You know, Jack's like, no, 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 no. We can't do
Oh
that.
man,
And I'm like,
yeah,
Jack, I
yeah,
come on. You
yeah.
know,
We
this is
do, yeah,
we do.
yeah.
And he's like,
It's
no, 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 no.
fine.
I'm gonna, and I was like, well, how much is this Drive Busters thing? And he's like, it's 3K, but I'm gonna pay for it. And I'm like, if you're not gonna pay for that, you know, like we're all songwriters. Like
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
we're not like, you know, ghost writers for like top liners, you know, like we're all on the same page. And I'm like, 3K, like you're not gonna pay for it. No, like that's, and he's like, no, 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 like, you know, and I'm like, no, you know, I need his number and it's okay. And he's like, no, like, let me just pay for my piece. And I'm like, I don't really think that's how peace works, but
Yeah.
you know, if that's what you think, then, you know, I don't know. Like, can we at least talk about this after the scan's done? In that moment, scan completes. He turns around, he looks at it, and he turns back to me, and he's like, and I was just like, it was the first time that I knew what our reality was, as opposed to like, you know,
The
going
hypotheticals.
down a
Yeah,
fear trip of
yeah,
like,
yeah,
oh
yeah.
God, what if it's not there? You know, which is something that Jack was doing the whole time, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So I was deciding to not do that. And then the reality of the situation presented itself. And I was like, okay, I need to take a moment. I went outside, took a moment, and I was thinking to myself, like, maybe this is like, I don't know, like maybe this is like some kind of sign, like maybe we're not supposed to be doing this. Maybe this is too intense of a project. Maybe this is, you know, maybe hypotheticals, maybe.
Yeah.
And I ended up calling a friend and she talked me down and she was just like, no, this is fucking bullshit. Go in there, get the owner's number, have that conversation. You don't need to, you know. And I was like, yeah, absolutely. It's been what I've been trying to do. So I go back in and poor Eli, you know,
Yeah.
he never, you know, tried to drive the situation. He was always just kind of like, what do you want to do, you know? And he was just kind of an instrument there for me also to use and navigate our way through what we were going through. And you know, I went back inside the studio and he was like, what do you want to do? And I was like, I need to talk to the owner of the studio and we just need to open up a dialogue. And you know, at least like I got to get my money back. Like, you know, we all flew out here. And
yeah, 100%.
so in that moment, like Jack comes out and he's like, I'm so sorry, like I'm gonna pay for the Drive Buster. And I was like, no, you're not. Like I'm getting the number, you know, I need to get the person's number. And he refuses and tells me some story of like why he can't give me his number. And at that point I was just so exhausted that I just chose not to fight him on it. And I was like, okay. And we like, you know, to kind of calm the tension in the room, like we smoked a joint and like left the space. And we left that studio with 4 out of 12 tracks. And
Oh
you know,
man.
we went back home. When I got back home, I texted Jack and I just was like, I can't believe this, you know, like this is kind of crazy. And he was like, I know, like I actually ended up paying for a third scan with a different Apple tech and I must have deleted the session because it's nowhere to be found.
Oh my gosh.
I was really gutted. I got to be honest. I was really
Well,
gutted.
yeah.
And Eli was gutted. And then I had to tell Kit and Ian. They were like, what? They
Yeah.
were just like, what are you, Ian especially was like, I'm sorry, what? Like, this doesn't make any sense. The only thing that I still to this day can like think of that might have happened was, I mean, that was a haunted ass studio. Like, part of me thinks like maybe, I mean, this is a far out thought, but like I think sometimes like, God, maybe the spirits in there just wanted to hear, you know, maybe they wanted to hear the record and maybe they've found a way to hear it through the computer and then maybe they couldn't figure out a way to put it back in its place. I don't know. Like, that's what I like to have that thought, you know, like who knows if that's actually what happened, but I'd like to think it went like that. But, you know, throughout all of this, I had been in touch with our band's basically he's like a bandmate. He's one of our bandmates, sort of. He's like our band dad, and his name is Alex Cherie. and he's one of my best friends in this life. And he is the reason why we're a band. In like 2017, I started recording at his studio that he opened. It was called Seaward Studios. And Ian and Kit were the session players that had come in that he knew. And and so Alec and his wife, they kind of ran this studio out of their house in North Hollywood. And it was more than a studio. I mean, Alec is an incredible engineer, incredible person, incredible artist, incredible thinker. And his wife, Jessica Amal Sherry, she was this amazing artist, actor, improv doer, stand-up comedian. She was honestly, she was a comedian. She was a laugh. And they basically are our band's parents, essentially. And because that's where we started. We started at Seaward. And, we've worked with Alec over the years. He engineered one of our songs, Pink Visions, that was on our last EP. And so anyway, I had been in touch with Alec throughout this whole trip in Chicago, because everything was going wrong. And it just, it got to the point where we got back to LA, and he called me and he was like, what the fuck happened? And I told him, and he was like, no, this is not acceptable. We're going to do this. This is not you. He was like, no, I'm flying out. So he had actually just moved to Ohio. Unfortunately, last year in September, our dear friend and Alex love, Jessica, she passed away from stage 4 cancer.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
And left behind Alec and Regina, their baby girl. But so Alec, and she was such an incredible person. We're actually dedicating the record to her, because she's just so much a part of it in all the ways. But anyway, Alec moved. He relocated, at the end of last year to get kind of a fresh start. And he was like, I'm flying out in January. We're going to do this. I'm going to track it. We'll do it at the house, because that's what you wanted to do originally, and it's free. And so I was like, okay, let's do this. So we booked out a weekend in January, probably just about a month ago. And it was our first time. It was the first time that we had seen each other since Chicago. And the first time we had played together since Chicago. Yeah. And Ian and Kit got there, and we had a kind of a dress rehearsal on, that Saturday. And it was such a blast. It was like such a blast. And we just were such kids with it. And there were so many fun moments of like pretending to be characters and like just be, being fucking friends. They're my best friends. So it was great. And we had this dress rehearsal, and it went really well. And we kind of just rehearsed the whole record. And then we had plans of recording it the next day, that Sunday. And so that's what we did. We started early in the morning on that Sunday, and we got up and we went into it, and we recorded side A twice, and we decided to go with the first take.
Love it. Love it. Yeah.
Yeah. And then, side B is a little different. It was recorded a little differently, because it's not that it isn't transitional, but it's less transitional, and that it sounds like one full song. Side A very much sounds like that, as opposed to side B is like kind of more song by song. So we tracked, track by track, with each song, but we did it live. We did multi-track, and that was such a blast. And
that's awesome.
So by the end of the day, I think it took us, we started at 11 a.m. and we stopped at like 9:58 p.m. And the only reason I can tell you that number specifically is because like this has been a project in the making for years. So I remembered when we ended. But we finished the record, and one of the last songs on the record is called Behind the Door, and it's our oldest song. We've had it for 6 years, and we finished it the day before we recorded it. And I remember we did 2 takes of it, and at the end of the second take, we also played in a circle, because Alec is so brilliant in the way in which he sets up a space and sets up musicians to play toward one another. So we had the upright face. It was in the middle of the room, and it was facing Kit and his bass amp, and then Ian was over to the left side of me, so he was picking up the heavier end of the piano. And the way he placed everything was so brilliant, and we owe that all to
I
him.
love it. Yeah.
And we owe so much to him. But I'll never forget playing that last song, finishing, we played the last chord, and I just looked at Ian, and I looked at Kit, and I looked at Eli. We were done, and there was not a sound in the room, and no breath. And we were all so breathless, and it was like this moment of completion of like all this time we had been going through all of these trials and tribulations as a band, as friends, losing bandmates, losing the record, like losing people, losing and there were so many parallels in that moment, but there was also such this moment of like kinship, and it was incredible. And we debriefed, and it was just a surreal thing, and it's still a surreal thing, and so yeah, that's the story of the record, Door to Nowhere.
What is it called again?
It's called Door to Knowhere.
Door to Nowhere.
And it's spelled Know, and then here, so like no here.
Perfect.
But yeah, that's the making of the record.
Oh my gosh, that is so. I cannot imagine that feeling the moment you find out it's done. It's not there. It's done. Because like you said, like up until that moment, there's always that what if, and there's always that hypothetical, and like, no, let's hope for the best. Let's hope for the best, and you're trying to be positive and stuff. And the moment you find out it's gone, it's gone. It's gone. That's it.
Yeah.
Like that moment of like realization, like as someone who's like spent time in a studio and like spent money on studio and like spent time and sweated and freaked out and like scheduled and all of the above, like. Yeah, I can't imagine. Like that moment is like so heartbreaking to me.
Honestly, it's hilarious. It has to be hilarious because you have to laugh.
Like so unrealistic for it to happen. Because I feel like there's so many steps along the way that prevent that moment from happening.
Right.
So like for it to happen, you're like this cannot be real, to be able to then find the way it was supposed to be made. Like this is how this album was supposed to be made, with the people it was supposed to be made with, in the space it was supposed to be made in.
Yes,
that's the point, and I think that's amazing, and I genuinely can't wait to hear it. I know it's still in early phases, but like, do you have a release time frame for the album itself?
I really would love to. I would love if we could finish this in the next 6 months. We still have like little overdubs to do. It has to be mixed, Alex Sherry is going to mix it. He's brilliant.
Yeah. But you're hoping before the end of this year.
We're hoping.
Cool.
Really hoping it would be, at this point, now that it exists outside of all of our bodies, I think we're starting to realize like, oh, this is actually a really vast project, and we're going to need a lot of people involved. So I don't know. I feel almost like it's irresponsible for me to say, there needs to be a deadline.
Say nothing else. I don't think there should be a deadline. I was just curious.
I
think especially with something like this, like, I think everyone has already learned, like, this project needs to go at its own pace. So
That's exactly.
It will be ready when it is fucking ready, and not a moment sooner. Yeah.
Exactly. It will be ready
I love
when
that
it wants to be ready. And I have never trusted that more. So yeah, that's
oh my gosh, that is so funny. I love it. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. Like, what a wild experience.
Thank you for having me and letting me share.
Where would you prefer that I point people towards to find you and all of the beautiful art that you create?
Thank you. I have some solo work out under Mollie Jane, just an EP of like 3 songs. Actually made it with Kit and Ian many years ago, before we were even a band. And then we also, about 3 years ago, we released an EP called Milk, and it is under the band Milk on the streaming platforms. We actually only have singles on the streaming platforms. If you are wanting to listen to the whole record, you do have to purchase it on iTunes or Bandcamp.
Perfect. I'll point people towards the Bandcamp because their payouts are usually better for the artists.
Yes, they are. Yeah. They are. And we so appreciate that. Anybody who wants to, acknowledge our existence by supporting us is a friend of ours.
Yeah, so, I love that. I love that. Awesome. Thank you so much. I will point people towards those things. I'll give you the rest of your day back.
Thank you so much for having me.
I love it. Yes, of course. Yeah, thank you again. This was awesome. And I'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, for sure.
All right.
Wow. All right. Have a beautiful day.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of Tell Me Yours. Thank you, Mollie, for sharing that wild story. If you want to follow Mollie, head over to Instagram. She is just at Mollie Jane Green. If you want to follow her band, the band Milk, on Instagram, they are at the band Milk. Again, I'll throw some links in the show notes of this episode. If you want to purchase their most recent EP, head over to Bandcamp. Link is in the show notes of this episode. If you want some extra time with Mollie, head over to patreon.com/tellmeyours. Mollie is a dear friend of mine. I loved talking to her. She is an incredible artist. Definitely head over to Patreon and get some extra time with her. If you want to follow us, Twitter and Instagram, we are at TellMeYoursPod. Be sure to like our podcast, share it with your friends, subscribe to us, drop us a note, leave a review, tell us your favorite story.